Hello everyone. In today's episode of Unreal for Everyone, I'm going to be making an auto landscape material and also covering some of the basics of material network in Unreal Engine 5.5. So grab your coffee and hope you like the video. Alright guys, so let's jump into Unreal Engine right away. And I'm going to be getting a height map for this project as an sample. So let's just go ahead and pick a height map. Just gonna randomly find a spot that's not too high. Just about right. And I'm gonna go with I don't know, 4,000 by 4,000. And if you guys are following this, just make sure that when you generate your height map, you also look at the scale on the left side. So these are the numbers that you want to put into your landscape in your Unreal Engine. All right, now that it's in, I'm going to be putting the sizes in. All right, so now I have my size put in, and the only thing left to do is click on import. Okay, so I have successfully imported a landscape, and this is a landscape I'm going to be using for my demo. So we're going to be creating a basic landscape material using fab assets, so everyone can replicate it. I'm just going to scale this whole thing down so it's not too big to work with for the sample. Okay, so I'm going to be using this spot, or maybe let's just find a more suitable spot for I might just even edit the terrain a little bit. Menu landscape, we're going to use flatten tool, and I'm just going to sample this area and flatten it out a little bit. Maybe even go for a bigger area. And yeah, I'm just going to flatten this out a fair bit just so I have some area to be around. I'm using the smooth tool. I'm just going to smooth these edges right in again. And that seems about right. So let's go and stay over here, and we'll use this as our reference point. So let's just put a camera here just so we don't get lost. Put the camera there, and I will lock the transform on the camera. Perfect. Okay, so landscape materials can be made quite a different ways, but I'm going to be showing you guys just a simple technique that I use, and this is also something I don't recommend that if you have a really complicated material you use it, but it's only just in case you want to learn from scratch on how and what is happening inside Unreal Engine and what happens in those nodes that you're bringing in from other master materials or from an asset, or how would you make your own workflow so everything works for you. Let's just go ahead and start right off by making the material. I'm going to call this auto landscape material. And right off the back, I'm going to also create an instance. I'm going to use my instance on my landscape. And once I have my instance installed on the landscape, I am going to be going into my master material. Okay, once you load up in your shader, this is basically where you create your main material for your landscape. Now you can either use this to begin with, or you can turn this into material attributes, which is what we use once we get to a little bit of an advanced stage. For now, I'm just gonna stick with this and see how everything works. So to begin with, let's just grab a few assets from Fab. I'm just gonna open the Fab window right over here, and I'm gonna look up Quixel, and then I'm just gonna look for materials. Maybe I'll look for ground. Something like mossy ground works. And I'm just gonna add that to the project. Also going to look for some other textures to blend with in and let's just go and look at rock. Let's use cliff rock is pretty good, and just keep looking until I find something I like. I quite like this one, so I'm just gonna go with this. And once I have that, I'm also gonna look up for something, maybe snow. Okay, so I found 3 assets that I want to use in this example. The 3 assets that I'm going to be using are ground, snow, and cliff rocks. So these are the assets that I want to mainly focus on in Unreal Engine right now, and I want to have them on my landscape in a way that they're automatically assigned to a slope, to the top, as well as to the ground. So let's just jump into Unreal Engine and start making this material. First of all, I want to start with importing my assets into Unreal Engine material shader. So we'll go and grab our rock assets. So as soon as you see this window, you're going to see 4 things. First of all, you're going to see the material demo. Then you're going to see something that is your albedo or color information. You have your normal information, and then you have ORM texture. Now this ORM texture is basically your occlusion, roughness, and metallic. Now this can vary from texture to texture. You could be importing a ORD texture, wherein D stands for displacement or height map. For now, I believe all 3 of my textures should have ORM, which is going to be very useful because we can split it into 3 different channels and use one texture sample node. So let's just go ahead and plan our shader out in a way that we can use all of this. Okay, now I have all my textures imported inside my material network, and I'm just going to arrange these base color, normal, and then ORM, and I'm going to do that for other textures as well. So a quick tip, you can select things that you want and press C to comment box them just so you can have them properly organized. So snow texture, and then I'm going to take this, comment box it into my ground texture. And I'm going to take all of these and comment box that into cliff. Okay, so let's see what happens if I plug in my ground texture first. So let's just look at this. There are multiple ways of doing texturing in Unreal Engine, and the most common way that people do landscape is using something called landscape layer blend and painting those layers onto your landscape. So that's a basic one that you can do. And then there's auto landscape, which is what we're going to look at today, which takes in account for slope and your world position height to get different textures on a landscape based on these properties. So let's just see what happens when we plug this in first. So once I plug this in and I press save, you can see that my instance is working, and I also have something which is called tiling happening over here. It is also really shiny because I have not plugged in the other assets into the ports, but yeah, we have this texture going on right now. So let's just go ahead and do a few more things. To make this better, I'm gonna plug everything in, plug in my normals, and plug in my ORM. I'm gonna split this, so since this is ORM texture, you can also see it over here. We're gonna use red for occlusion, and green for roughness, and blue for metallic. Now I'm gonna hit save, and right off the back you can see that it made quite a difference, and now we have some detail in our texture, and it's not like just shiny. These bumps that you see are created using normal map. If you also have a height map, you can turn on nanite displacement and then displace the geometry as well. But for now, we're just going to be looking at this. We're going to be working with the tiling, and then we're going to work on how we can make this procedural asset. So first of all, I want to move this to the side and add something called landscape coordinates. And I can also use a multiply just to have more control over it. So I'm going to use that. And I'm going to call this ground texture tiling. Maybe also put it in a group. Short priority one. And that will basically make it come up first in the instance. And let's plug this into our UVs. And default value 1. Once I save this, I can now hop out in content browser, open my instance, and now I should be able to click on my ground textures and control my tiling. So I can make this maybe 0.1, and everything becomes bigger. So basically, the less the number, the less it tiles, which means it gets bigger. So if I get further away and I change this to be 0.5, you can see that it tiles way more. So I'm going to keep it at 0.1 just for now, and then we'll work on how to hide this tiling. So for now, let's just stick to this. And alright, so I have this in, and now basically I'm going to be working on how to incorporate snow into this before we move on to the tiling. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make your own calculator that allows you to calculate your world height. And let's take this mountain peak for example. So it's going to count from here on down, subtract a part of it, and then allow you to use that as a mask to apply the snow texture on the peaks. And you can control how much it's applied by using something called fade. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and try to do that by ourselves. So we're gonna go here and let's try to create snow calculator. So I'm just gonna move all of this. Actually, I'm just gonna move everything just up here and make this full screen. I'm gonna put myself on the side over here so we're out of the way while I do all this. And okay, so first thing we want to use is absolute world position. So we're gonna type in world position, and then we're gonna use the z-axis because everything resides on z. So on the z-axis, we're gonna subtract. We're going to subtract a value, and this value is going to be converted into a parameter. So we're going to call this snow underscore height. And then I'm going to use this value to calculate how much I need to come down on the mountain. So a default value of, let's say, -1, -1. And I'll take that over here. After that, I'm going to be clamping this value and adding fade. So I'm going to go ahead and use clamp tool, which is there. And I'm going to use parameter and call this snow underscore fade. Now I want to group these as I'm going. So I'm going to select both of these and group them into snow underscore controls. And set that priority to be 1. So now these are going to be in snow control. And I'm going to take this over here, plug that into my subtract, and put a value in, I don't know, like a big number, maybe 4,000 to begin with. So now this is going to be basically be my fade, and this is going to be how much I'm coming down. Once I'm done with this, I'm gonna go ahead and divide this by the same number and then clamp it between 0 and 1 just to fit all the values that are happening over here into 0 and 1. So let's go ahead and add a divide, and we're going to use the same exact number to divide it, and then I'm going to use clamp to clamp the values into 0 and 1. So let's just see what this actually means. Okay, so I'm going to bring down my material output. I'm going to disconnect everything just so it's clean, and then we're going to use this, and I'm going to just plug this in and press save. Once I do that, I'm going to get out and see my whole landscape is now covered in white. So I'm going to go ahead and change my controls into the instance. So I'm going to use I reckon don't look at the numbers, but in general you should just look at what you're looking on the screen to gauge the value, because these numbers then get divided, and they're pretty much clamped into 0 and 1 if you look at our shader. So you want to look at the visual representation of where the peaks are, and then the visual representation of the fade of snow. So I'm going to keep it somewhere over here, let's say something like that, maybe a little bit less fade, and just leave my camera and look around as of how many peaks I got. So I got these peaks, but you can always decrease the height and get some more peaks if you want in your snow shot. So let's go with something like this, and we'll keep this as a starter. So this basically allows us to select a part of the landscape and create and use that as a mask, so we can apply a certain specific texture to that group. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna make this into a box and call it snow_calculator. We're gonna use this to calculate the texture, the height, and then apply that new texture over there. So I'm going to use this and just remove this from there. At this point, I want to use material attributes. So I'm going to take this node and convert that into use material attributes. So I'm going to full screen my shader just so we can take a look at everything better. Now let's incorporate snow into our material and use the calculator that we just made to apply that texture on. So now that I'm using material attributes over here, I can now expand this, and I can add a node called make material attributes. This allows me to consolidate everything into one node and then take this into my material attributes. Let's go ahead and plug this values in, and I'm in the occlusion, and the green is going to be my roughness, and blue is going to be my metallic. So I'm just going to plug it over there. Now once I have this, I can replicate the same process for my snow texture, and just going to plug this over here and plug all of these in. Going to be using the same landscape coordinate node, but adding a different multiplier, so this time we can control the tiling of the snow texture as well. So to bring this down for now, and just gonna add one more multiply with another parameter, call it snow underscore space texture tiling, and I'm gonna put that into group later on. So let's just do that first, and default y1, take that and put it into my snow textures, and then let's put this into snow underscore textures, sort priority number 1. Okay, so now I have individual tile control over ground, and I also have individual tile control over my snow. Sorry, this needs to be going from over here. And now we should be pretty good to have a look at both of them together using this calculator. So I'm just going to put this somewhere here, and let's use something called blend material attributes to blend these. So I'm going to be using this, and this is going to be connecting to my output node, and we're going to connect this into my A and connect this into my B. And like I said, we're going to be using the calculator to calculate our alpha. I'm going to take that and connect that over there. Just move everything a little bit to the right and press save. Once I save this and exit, as you can see, I have my ground texture over here, and let's just go take a closer look at the snow texture. Seems to be working fine, except for the tiling that is happening right now. So I can also go ahead and go to my instance, and under snow texture, change my tiling to be 0.1, and that becomes a way more appealing tiling than the other one. We're still gonna leave the tiling for now, and we'll see how we can hide tiling using something like macro or micro variation, which is an easier way of doing it. Okay, so once we have this, we're gonna look at how we can get rock on some slopes and incorporate our third texture, which is this one, into the whole game. So let's go ahead and start making a calculator for that. Similarly, how we calculated the height, we're gonna this time use a different method. We're gonna calculate the slope angle, or rather, we're gonna use something that is world aligned. But blend material. Calculating getting the texture on the side is fairly simple when it comes to using the nodes that Unreal Engine provides us. So we're going to use make material attributes again, so just to make everything into a material. And I'm also going to add one more calculator, which is going to be allowing me to control the tiling on my cliff. So let's just go ahead and add a multiply over here and take my UVs over there, and we'll take the same landscape coordinate node, and we'll use something called the scalar parameter again. And this is going to be our rock underscore texture underscore tiling. Just going to plug that in over here, default value of 1, and I will put that into rock underscore textures group, sort priority 1. Once I have that, I'm going to be connecting RGB, so my base color goes to base color, and my normal RGB goes to normal. And my ORM texture is going to be occlusion, roughness, and metallic. Just gonna make sure that this is ORM. It does read ORM. Okay, sounds good. Looks good. Okay, so I'm gonna be plugging the UVs in here as well. And once I have that, I'm going to be using one more blend material attributes. And this time I'm going to reverse these, because the way the calculator works, sometimes if you have it reversed, it takes the opposite result. So we can keep this as it is, and just go ahead and work with my calculator for now. So we're going to be using world aligned blend. So world aligned blend, and this will allow us to blend everything into one using our 3 textures, and also give us control on the sides. So the 2 things you want to make into parameter here are blend sharpness, so promote that to a parameter, and then blend bias and promote that to a parameter. So for me, the values that have worked are 15 and a value of -6. I like to start with these values just to see some result, and then you can always play with these. Treat this as a seed as well. So use your visual graph to see what it looks like, and then you can pretty much change the values to get the result that you want to get on your landscape. So let's just go ahead and plug everything in. So I'm going to be using this as my alpha this time. This controls my blend. I'm going to be using vertex normals, okay, because we also have normal maps in play. So we're going to be using vertex normals and take that into alpha. And I'm going to be plugging my rock as my A channel and plug in my grass, which is over here, grass and snow together, into my B, and take the final output into material. Press save. Once I save, as you can see that I have my textures. However, it's a little messed up. So let's just go ahead and play with our nodes to get the desired result. So I'm gonna go ahead and select my landscape material, and I'm gonna be playing with my parameters to fix the texture that's already applied. So let's go ahead and try to get this a little bit better looking. Okay, as you can see, it's taking a slope angle and applying the texture automatically in those spaces to make it look like rocks, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm looking at this area where the fall-off's there. We still have our snow peak, and then we have our cliff, and that slowly rolls down into our grass. Let's ignore the tiling for now and just pay attention to what the texture looks like. So let's go ahead and see what happens actually if I change the tiling a little bit. So let's go here and make it 0.1, and you can see that it's a little bit better now. It takes in the texture on the slopes. Just to show you guys, it also works with painting. So if you're in landscape painting and you select sculpt and you just paint up, as soon as you cross a certain threshold, it's gonna swap the texture for the texture that you have. I'm gonna go ahead and flatten this area out. So I'm gonna use this and just flatten it out a little bit, and you can see that it actually applies the cliff texture as soon as I have a slope, and it also applies my ground texture on top and bottom. However, if I do take this higher beyond the peak of the snow, then it's also going to capture the snow. So that's the whole point of it. You want to save time making your landscapes when you're dealing like with landscapes in such huge size. You want to use auto landscape material, so it applies a certain material the way it's meant to look on a slope or somewhere, and saves you the time to go and paint everything inside. So now that we have this material, we're gonna go ahead and start hiding the tiling. So in order to hide the tiling, the first thing that you want to do is you want to use a thing called macro variation or any sort of noise. You want to use some sort of noise to replicate the texture that is on your land, and then maybe you can use the noise in different sizes and mix it around so your material looks a little bit different. You can apply a little bit of a tint to that noise, or you can apply something even better and just use texture bombing. So for now in this tutorial, I'm going to be looking at how to manually do tiling and manually hide tiling, I mean. So let's just go ahead and start that process. So first of all, I want to make sure that all of these are parameters, so we can replace them on the instance level. So I want to be able to go ahead and change these textures over here in case I want to swap the ground texture for something else later on. So let's just go ahead and make all of these into parameters. Call this ground underscore color. Ground underscore normal. Ground underscore ORM. And I'm going to be doing that for all three of these. Okay, so I've renamed all of these, and I've also converted them into parameters. So now that they're a parameter, if I save this, I am able to go ahead and change these textures over here. I might also just go in and group them so they're in their specific groups. So let's just go ahead and do that as well. Just group this into ground textures. So I'm going to select all three of them and group them into ground textures. Now if I save this and go and look at my instance, you should be able to see that I do have my snow controls over here and I have my snow textures. I can swap this anytime, and I can also swap my ground textures anytime. I also have my tiling control over here. And now we're going to be building control for some proper tiling so we can hide the repetition and still have some control and organicness in our landscape over here. So first of all, I want to look at something called micro and macro variation, as well as I want to look at something called tinting. So I'm going to be using tint to be able to change a little bit of the pattern of what I'm doing here. So let's just go ahead and add micro tinting to our landscape. So I'm going to create, let's just use this on the side for now. Use that and use this. So we have two of the same textures, and I'm going to be taking multiply, and I'm going to be applying 3 vector, which is you can get this by holding 3 on your keyboard and left clicking. This is basically color, and I want to be able to tint the whole material. So I'm going to take that and put it over here and multiply it with my base color to get a certain color. Now if this is black, it's going to take the color, but if I set this to white, it's going to treat it as alpha and it's going to let it pass. Okay, I'm going to make this into parameter and call it ground underscore albedo underscore tint. So this is what I'm going to be using to tint everything. I'm going to go ahead and put this into my ground texture group as well. Still going to be using the same tiling for this, so let's just plug in my tiling over here, and also plug in my tiling from here over here as well. Now using this is basically going to be how I tint my major landscape, but also I'm also adding, okay, once I have this added in my scene, actually I'm not going to use this. I'm going to use a separate tiling for my micro. So I'm going to use, maybe I'm going to remove this as well and put in 2 new scalar parameters and call the first one major tiling, actually ground major tiling, and give that maybe 0.5. And I'm going to use something as ground underscore minor underscore tiling. This is basically going to be my smaller tiles. Let's go ahead and plug this into my same group as well as I'm doing this. So ground textures. And now I'm going to be multiplying these with landscape coordinates. So let's just get that. Plug that in over there. Get that. Plug that over there. So now I have 2 types of different tilings going on. I'm going to name this 0.005, just so it's a very, actually 0.05, just so it's a bigger tile as opposed to this one over here. We're just going to go ahead and get one more tint. So I'm going to get 3 vector and call this one my micro tint. So I'm going to call this ground underscore micro underscore tint, and then I'm going to use this along with my multiply. And now this becomes my setup where I'm able to tint my major thing, which is my bigger tiles, using a different color, and I'm also able to tint everything that's smaller using a different color. And now if I change both of these colors, it basically will tint the whole complete landscape. But this allows me to create some sort of randomness in the texture. So I can have a little bit of light green and also have a little bit of darker shade. So I can have some variation in the ground texture over here. Moving on, I'm going to be using something called noise, or let's just say macro variation, as Unreal Engine provides us. We'll look up macro variation, and then we're going to be using this to control the mix between these two. So I'm going to take that and plug something in here to control the UV as well. So let's say micro variation underscore tiling, and put this at maybe the same as my ground minor tiling. And I'm going to go ahead and plug this from landscape coordinates into multiply, and then plug that into texture sample. This allows me to create the texture and use this noise to put this color in some areas. Okay, so let's just go ahead and have a look at this. Okay, so I'm gonna be taking a lerp. I'm gonna be using lerp to mix this texture along with this one, and then control the alpha using this. And let's just output this into base color to see what we get. Okay, once I do that, I do see some stuff has changed in my landscape. And let's just go ahead and look at everything in over here. And I'm going to change my albedos. So within ground textures, I do have my micro tinting. So I'm going to change that to a lighter green. I forgot to plug in the landscape coordinates, so I'm just going to take those and plug them in. I know it looks a little bit messy right now, but we're going to fix everything in some time. So just plug all of this in, and then plug this into my base color and hit apply. Okay. Once I do that, I should be able to see that there is some sort of variation happening in my tiling. And let's just try and see what happens if I change the color. So go into my micro tint and give it maybe a little bit of yellow. And I also have a major tint, which is over here, and I can also show you that it does not affect the yellow part. It only affects the noise that is over there. And this tiling is controlled using my micro variation tiling as well. So I can maybe change this to get a different result. I can also go ahead and play with my tiling on the ground textures. So I can make it maybe a little bit bigger, smaller, and you can see that it gives me a little bit more variation. It's not completely hidden, but it's given me some sort of variation right now. So let's cancel this and plug the same values that we were playing with before. And now I'm going to go ahead and do something else to make this even less repeating, which is called macro variation. So we have our micro tint and we have our micro variations. Let's just move them up here. Move this up here. And let's work on creating of a macro variation, which is going to be one more thing that is going to take and help us hide all those things. Okay, so I'm going to be using the same texture this time. So texture sample. And I'm going to be using the macro variation texture. I'm going to copy that, paste that again, and I have two different variations of it. This time I'm going to be using the same thing. I'm going to be using multiply for controlling the UVs. scalar parameter, and I'm gonna use this to control my tiny size UV. It can actually also be a constant because I'm not gonna be changing it as often. Keep a value of 0.0015, something really small, and gonna put it here, and I'm gonna give this another value. This time I'm gonna use this as 0.005. Still a big tile, but smaller than this tile. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and multiply that there, and I'm gonna use landscape coordinates to provide the UVs again. Okay, so once I have these set up, I'm gonna see what I can do now to add these. Okay, we don't want to use them as a mask, but we want to add these to our texture over here. So I'm going to use an add node. Just leave it over here, put 1, and put that node over there, and then use a multiply to mix these nodes in, and then I can take this out into a loop. Can use this in my alpha, and I'm going to control all of this using something called contrast. Use this contrast over here. Let's give a default value of 0.5, just so we can have it something, just to make us see something. Once I have that, I'm going to be taking that and I'm gonna multiply that with my previous result to get a different type of base color. So let's just go ahead and get a multiply over here. Take that in there, and we'll take the lerp in B, and we'll take all of that into our base color again. Once I have that, press save. And now you can see I have even better result in tiling than before. So now I have a bigger tile and I have some sort of contrast to play with. So let's just go ahead and change these values to see what happens. Okay, I'm able to hide the tiling as well as introduce a little bit contrast and color in my scene. Just gonna play with a few tiling numbers here to see what I can get. Just playing with a few numbers to see what I can achieve on this landscape right now. Okay, so just by playing with some numbers, I'm able to hide the tiling much better than before. Just look at everything, how everything looks. I'm just gonna go around and show you guys how everything looks. Okay, now that's the most basic way of doing this. Now let's simplify our material over here so it looks a little bit better and it works with all of the textures. So the first thing you want to do is you want to find things that are repeated. Okay, so for example, I could take all of this and call it macro variation. So the way you do that is you collapse everything into a material function and it creates one node wherein all the math happens, and you're able to use that math again and again in your textures, or rather in your material. Okay, so remember that there's this multiply out here, and we also have this lerp over here. However, I can still take all of this in into a subnet. So let's go ahead and take this and combine this itself into one. Okay, just gonna use before I do that, I'm gonna take this and use something called a reroute node. I'm gonna call that ls. And that allows me to call ls whatever I want. So I'm going to take that and put it here, and put it here as well. So now I have this. Just to make this a little bit tidy, you can add a few nodes. If you want to add nodes, you can just double click wherever on the line, and that allows you to add these nodes. Just gonna go ahead and put this here, and tidy this up a little bit. And then I can take all of this and collapse that into a function. I'm going to call this function macro variation underscore r, just because whenever I make a function, I want it to be r, so I know that I created it. You can also jump in and make sure that exposed to library on the left side is turned on. This will make sure that when I press right click and search for it, it shows up. Let's jump back into my material, and I have my macro variation over here, and it also says that it goes to lerp input. The lerp is the last input, and it has to be plugged into multiply a over here. So I'm going to go into my macro variation and make sure that when this is outputting, I'm going to change the output name over here and call it output to multiply a. And now this will remind me where it needs to go. Just gonna apply, save, go out, save all. Okay, this may not change directly, but if you bring in a new node, it should change it should update the name over here. Just go ahead and plug that in. And now this is going to be my macro variation for each and every texture. Now I can do the same for maybe micro. So let's just see what's happening over here. So that's sample, and it plugs in into lerp over here, and it goes into alpha. Okay. So let's just go ahead and do the same over here. I'm just gonna do this for everything, and come back and show you guys how it looks. Okay, while tidying up, I just realized that I need to still do this for all of my textures over here. So the one thing to note is you do not need to use the tint for your normals and your ORM, but you do need to still do all of these and use the same exact values, because you want to keep your tiling the same so it tiles with your base color. Otherwise, the problem is going to be that your texture is going to tile, but your normal maps are not going to tile. Okay, so it's going to incorporate this into the below over here. Okay, so we've been doing the ORM texture the same way that we were doing on everything else, but I also need to change one thing over here. I also got rid of the older textures and all the tiling, because we were using one tiling, which is major, minor, and that's been used 3 times for all the textures, right? Obviously, you can turn everything into a texture 2D object and make it even smaller, but the goal for this one is so everyone knows what's happening inside those functions and how you would do it manually, just to know how the functioning works before you actually collapse everything now into even smaller functions. It's necessary to know that you can do this a longer way and learn for the first few times before you go into making everything into a function and using texture 2D parameters and different side of float values, vector values, and other values, and getting lost, So let's go ahead and take this, but just remember this: after this multiply, we need to split the components again into RG and B, because this channel carries 3 values for all of this, right? So we're going to take and split these values again into your occlusion, your roughness, and your metallic. Okay, just give me a second. I'm gonna tidy everything up and be back. Gonna go ahead and group these as well. Alright, so I'm gonna do the same thing for Cliff again. And then finally, I'm just gonna plug everything back into my output nodes. Like, you would obviously simplify all of this, but this is one method of understanding how everything works before you go ahead and simplify everything down. Okay, just give me a minute. I like to just color them the same as their node, just so it's easier to spot everything once you leave the project and jump back in. I'm gonna tint them a little bit blue. So now we know that green is your base color, blue is your normal, and yellow is your ORM textures happening all at once. Let's just go ahead and plug everything into my final output node. So I haven't touched all of this, so I'm just gonna call this slope calculation. You can also make this into a function, but this is good for now. I'm gonna take that and plug that final output pin into my blend over here. And once I do that, I can press save. Now, this may not exactly work for all of your textures. It may work for your cliff and maybe your grass, but not work for your snow. And that depends on your textures. Like, you can be doing that differently. Like, you could apply a different tint, maybe apply a different tiling size, maybe use a different noise sample. Your mileage may vary depending on what type of textures you are using. But then again, this is fully customizable, so you can pretty much add something to it, and that will help. So for example, right now my tilings just come back, and let's just go and change some numbers. So my problem's happening inside over here. So I'm gonna just replace this with landscape coordinates. Just go ahead and give that for UV over here, and give that for UV over here as well. And then change that and apply. As you can see, my tiling is now working again, and changing some values will give me a better result. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that for now. Maybe see everything in a different type of light, and maybe bring down the snow a little bit more. Just go here and go to my snow controls and give it a little bit more snow, and maybe increase that, and decrease the intensity on the light. Now this is just an example. In future we're going to look at some different stuff on how to correct the UVs on these cliffs, because they're pretty rough right now, and how to even further hide our tiling, and also look at a few different options on PCG content generation, so we can have a little bit better idea of how we want to spawn things on these materials and separate them, or maybe how to even paint them. Goal was to give you guys an idea on how to use the auto landscape material and how to apply a material on a landscape automatically using different types of selection methods. And in the future, we're going to look at how to change this and have a proper tiling on the mountains so the UVs don't stretch. We're also going to look at runtime virtual texturing, which is basically RVT, which will allow us to merge some stuff with the landscape material, as well as we're going to look at painting and PCG content generation. So I hope you guys like this video, and if you like this video, please leave a like and a sub. Thank you.